Well, that was certainly a strange introductory video. How are you doing today? Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're tuning in tonight with us, we are going to, as many of you may not be aware, going to start um, developing more weekly content, producing more weekly content, and every week, at least once a week, I felt like I could take the time to talk about some of the biggest national news that we've seen in the last week. It's a weekly talk, so weekly national news. Talk to you guys about it, see what you think, help educate me, and hopefully I'll help educate you through these conversations, talks, recaps, whatever you want to call them. But um, you're welcome to stay, you're welcome to leave if you have something a lot more important or awesome to do, or a lot more awesome and fun to do than to tune in and listen to some boring national news. But without further ado, I'm going to get right into it. I have four big topics this week that I think have been important. It is the holidays, so we haven't seen maybe as much happen politically and otherwise, given that, the holidays were here, people were at home with their families. So it's been, I'd say, a quieter week this week than most. So I think it's a great way to get started also because it gives me the opportunity to get a feel for what it might be like to talk about the news, to get a feel about, how this is going to fit with my strengths and my weaknesses, and find how you guys as an audience could fit into this particular weekly coverage that we're going to get started. So, um, how's it going, guys? Hey, April. Good evening, Georgia and Lori and Carrie Slack. All of you guys, thank you so much for tuning in on your Sunday nights. First, I want to talk about the coronavirus stimulus packet, which was not yet officially law until very recently. Tonight, Donald Trump, after a not a very long delay, but after some kind of delay, um, after a sorry, I got distracted with one of the comments. After a very short delay, after somewhat of a delay, my mistake. Trump did finally sign this particular stimulus package number two into law. It includes about $900 billion of aid. More notoriously, people are talking about the $600 that are being afforded to individuals who file taxes. Last year, I assume that the very same eligibility criteria are going to apply to this particular stimulus packet, or very similar type of criteria, right? People making under $75,000 are going to be receiving the $600. And we're also going to see that taper into people that make about $100,000 a year. After $100,000 a year, individuals or families or whatever will not be receiving the stimulus packet or the $600 we talk about. But between $75,000 and $100,000, there's going to be a tapering. So you're going to get less and less and more you make. Also, this is very similar to the program in spring, actually, so similar that a lot of the programs that are included in this particular bill are just programs that were developed back in spring. They're like a continuation of programs and sometimes in a smaller scale. So, for example, the federal government was adding $600 on top of state unemployment benefits to every individual. Now they're going to do that again, but instead of $600, they're going to be giving half of that amount. They're going to be giving $300 to each individual on top of what the state already provides for unemployment benefits. This bill also includes upwards of almost $300 billion for small businesses in different forms of aid. Some aid in the form of of forgivable loans, which means that if these small businesses use these loans specifically for things like keeping their staff paid, it's likely that these loans could be forgiven. It really depends on how the small businesses spend the money that is loaned to them, but that's among the money that was provided with this stimulus packet, which was about $900 billion. And again, that's in comparison to the earlier one. The earlier stimulus packet was about $2.2 trillion, where individuals got $1,200 instead of 600. Um, there is also a type of rent relief included, which again was a program that was already in action and was just kind of reinvigorated with this particular stimulus packet. Airlines are being helped as well. There's some industries that have directly been impacted. Sorry, ate a hair. There are some airlines that have directly been impacted. I mean, airlines industries. There's been some industries that have directly been impacted by the stimulus bill or by the pandemic, and will be directly impacted by the stimulus bill. And one of those is the airline industry, who argues that they, unlike many other industries, have been uniquely impacted because of the fact that travel has been restricted. There's been less people traveling. These restrictions that are being put in place by local governments are really making it hard for airlines to continue to make the money that they do. So a lot of the money that's given to airlines is primarily used to keep people from being furloughed, from being fired, from losing their job. It keeps people, with a paycheck that work for the airline industry. So that's another industry that's currently being affected by the stimulus packet, and those are the reasons cited by politicians. And I know that many of us have different opinions about whether or not the stimulus packet should include relief for airlines or for big corporations, or even foreign aid. There was some foreign aid included for Cambodia and other countries, which I'm not going to delve too deep into right now, but is definitely a point of contention, specifically, with Donald Trump, who doesn't, or who mentioned he didn't like the bill. He wanted more money per individual. He wanted up to $2,000 per person. In a speech, he said, "quote $2,000 per person or $4,000 per couple." He again refused to sign the bill. He had 10 days from the day that the bill was sent to his office, 10 days before he either signed it or vetoed it. And if he decided not to act, it would have been put into law anyway. But he did sign it tonight. So despite the delay, he signed it. Despite asking for more money, he signed it. He didn't like the foreign aid. He didn't like the fact that it included other types of funding for other programs. There's some educational programs included in there. There's all kinds of programs, and people have all kinds of opinions about how they feel. Nonetheless, we'll go deeper into that in our podcast and stuff. This is more a recap of what is the factual information that is provided to us about these particular events. All opinions aside, this is not my opinion, but rather just news coverage similar to what I would do on the ground, but except now I'm just reading it to you, and giving you the points that I thought were most important about this week's news. They also, as Carol mentioned, might have included, foreign aid for gender studies in Pakistan. Again, this bill was, crafted to include a lot more than just a stimulus package. It includes over 5,000 pages of information, and I do think it is important, at the very least, for every single one of our legislators involved in the process of passing this bill to be conscious of exactly what's being funded and whatnot. Trump kind of turned against Republicans, though, in some way, by saying that didn't include more money. Some Republicans have been fighting to include only $600. It's been a lot of negotiating back and forth, and it seems like maybe he doesn't directly disagree with either party, but Donald Trump definitely has an opinion that's really dissenting from what we've seen these individuals, these legislators negotiate. So he's not at the same table, and I think he has his own ideas about what needs to be included in the bill. And that was really clear in his speech, I think, on Wednesday night, when he talked about what he didn't like about the bill. Democrats seem to agree with having more money, more so than Republicans on the bill. But I also suspect that Republicans, there are many Republicans that I've heard. I don't have the exact numbers again, and I want to limit speculation on this particular podcast, but there was some Republicans that also support the $2,000 on the bill. Again, this has been a really difficult bill to pass because there's a lot of people, a lot of interests, a lot of different moving parts. And I think mostly, if anything, both parties right now are just urging the president to pass it, which he did, so that is no longer a problem. They asked Mitch McConnell to comment on several occasions. He declined to comment. So most people, just again, if they did comment, wanted this bill to pass because it is urgent. Currently, a lot of Americans are out of the job. We lost about 22 million jobs this past year, which is a lot of jobs to lose. And we haven't gained many of them. I think the last percentage was about 67% of those 22 million jobs lost have come back, but many of them have been lost. Many restaurants have permanently closed. This bill also focuses on helping restaurants and helping, again, we're mentioning things like airlines, industries that were directly impacted by what's been happening. So, there's a couple questions here that I had in mind when I prepared this. Donald Trump had not signed the stimulus packet, but he already did. So, will Trump sign? Yes, he did sign, despite the fact that he wanted more money and less clutter in this particular packet. This would have sent our government into a shutdown starting Tuesday, but thankfully that did not happen. This was really important. He had 10 days again, and just even less days, maybe a day and a half before the government shut down, but he prevented that. Another really good question to ask is $600 enough? Most people seem to agree that it's not. And I would say that there's a lot of people on both sides who feel like $600 may not be enough, but they may not necessarily agree on whether or not it's $2,000. I've heard senators and congressmen and women alike talk about their opinion on the exact figure, but I haven't seen any consensus. I feel like the general public might generally feel like $600 isn't enough. So, we got to keep in mind restaurants, live venues have been directly impacted by the pandemic. Less people are visiting or going to concerts. Actually, nobody's going to concerts right now. So you're seeing these live venues really suffer. Artists who depend on these live venues, restaurants, people that are selling things at these live venues. There could be people that work in lighting, stage production, sound production, all of whom are taking a direct loss. And this stimulus packet hopefully is going to help some of these individuals, restaurants, and live venues, turn that around and maybe have some semblance of hope for surviving the pandemic. And speculating about the economy, I've heard a lot of experts say that it's likely that these impacts are lasting and their economy is slipping back. There are some people that believe that it's going to slip back and bounce right back forward once restrictions are taken away. But again, that's all a matter of speculation. Economic models are so unpredictable and difficult to put together accurately. So I'd say just keep an eye out, what's happening, and just continue to read the news about the way that this stimulus packet is going through Congress. I mean, it already got passed, but there's a possibility that they may want to add more money. There may not be. It's a rather unpredictable. And again, I keep encouraging you guys to keep up to date because just tonight I discovered that Donald Trump signed the bill into law, and that hadn't been the case when I was preparing this. And so the amount of uncertainty is ridiculous. And that's why I say stay humble about the information you know. Those are kind of some of the facts that we know. We don't know how it's going to affect the economy. We don't know if it's enough. A lot of people disagree. But we do know a few things. Those are things we know over today. And the next thing that I want to cover is a bombing in Nashville. So that is a very recent event that has come into light. The bombing in Nashville was very shocking and unfortunate, to say the least. Several damaged buildings, but nobody who has perished aside from what has now been identified to be the perpetrator, Anthony Warner. Um, Anthony Warner, his house was searched, but not much is known about him, including a potential motive. There is absolutely no motive right now that is known. The only reason we know that Anthony Warner was present was because the VIN number on the vehicle that was used for the bomb was tied to his name, as well as DNA evidence and tissue that was found on the scene that also indicated that Anthony Warner was present, perished, and was the person who was the perpetrator of this bombing. It is also talked about that this RV was parked in this quiet street. There was a warning beforehand, so there's suspicion that this individual had no motive in killing a lot of people. He did it on a quiet day where there was very few people on a more lonely street where there was unlikely to be a large crowd. What happened was there was a call for shots fired early in the morning, about 5:30 in the morning, and around 6:30 the bomb went off. In between that time, about six police officers cleared the area when they heard the RV and its notice to clear the area and evacuate. There are videos of this circulating online. If you're interested to hear what the message exactly was, you can go ahead and look up those videos. It's nothing scary, particularly. It sounds like a female who's asking people to evacuate the area immediately if they can hear the message. But again, two or three people were injured. I think one of them was a police officer, but thankfully, um, no one was killed aside from the perpetrator. There was suspicion that there was another bomb earlier today, but it looked like it wasn't a bomb. All police officers, authorities believed it was a bomb after they heard a similar message being played out of that vehicle. But so far, I have not kept up with what that vehicle ended up being. I know that a tow truck towed it away while I was watching live. Many people thought this was a second bomb, but again, no evidence that it was necessarily a second bomb. Maybe you guys already knew um, something. I just can't. I know that some of you guys might feel like you have more information, and if you do, I totally welcome it. But again, I will not repeat something I'm not 100% sure about. So, this was not immediately connected with terrorism. There's no suspicion right now that it is connected with any types of terrorist acts or motives. So, the question for this particular bombing is what was the motive? Why did Anthony Warner feel like he needed to bomb uh, the street he did near an AT&T communication center, which reported shortages as a result of the bombing, but was able to mostly restore most of its communication issues pretty promptly. Now there's no communication issues going on in Nashville. Some people suspect he might have been targeting the AT&T building, but again, so far no motive has been determined. They were also able to identify Anthony Warner because their family has been collaborating and helping investigators. They did agree to a DNA test, and that's how they were able to really quickly, using the DNA, identify that Anthony Warner was indeed at the scene at the moment that the bomb went off. So, next thing, I need to put like a little stand for my notes. I try to keep notes, and that way I'm not looking down because it looks like I'm looking down. But I'd rather look at you guys. Um, Yeah, George, it sounded like a female was the one that was making the announcement. People, I don't think there's been any official reports yet on whether or not that was pre-recorded, whether or not that was Anthony Warner himself. I think those details don't really matter, but they're, interesting little tidbits of information that we have. Meanwhile, the investigation is coming together. But is yeah, nothing but a weird tidbit of information that we have. Nothing that gives us anything, that explains what was happening or whether there was collaborators, etc. So the next thing I want to cover is again coronavirus. Coronavirus has been on our minds and in our hearts for the larger part of this year, maybe starting since March, the day that many of us went into quarantine for the first time. Many of us have not come out of quarantine. I definitely have not. We've been now using masks, being a lot more careful about the way that we interact with others, keeping 6 feet of distance to try to avoid the spread of the coronavirus. But has it all been in vain? Many people are wondering that because there has been a coronavirus mutation in the UK that has caused quite the stir in the news and in our, I guess, in social media and stuff. Specifically because there's this picture that was shared about truckers being stuck on the, I guess, border between France and Britain. They had no way of getting through because they started requiring everybody that crossed the border to have a negative coronavirus test, which was almost impossible to do with thousands of truckers passing a day through that particular border. We saw thousands of people stuck, in traffic helplessly. Meanwhile, officials were trying to, the UK and France officials were trying to strike a deal, which they did. So thankfully, now that traffic in particular is going down. But that still begs the question: what is going on with this mutated virus? Well, as many of you know, as many of you may not know, the virus in and of itself was expected to mutate and actually mutates every month. At least once a month, up to 3 times a month, we see minor mutations in the coronavirus. Coronavirus, coronavirus. I was going to say coronavirus virus, but it's that the coronavirus. Um, there have been several mutations that have taken place since we discovered this virus. But typically, these mutations are limited to like 1 or 2 to 3 changes in the virus. The mutations aren't as exaggerated, but in the UK, they identified a virus which was seemingly more contagious and had up to 17 mutations versus 3, which we're used to seeing typically in viruses. So these 17 mutations were unique in that they changed the spike proteins. And many of you guys don't know, but maybe you've seen the picture of the coronavirus, a little circle with a lot of little spikes on it. It looks like, I don't know, like a spike ball. um, that's so terrible. That was useless in trying to give you an image of the what the coronavirus looks like, but I'm sure you've seen it. And so what it has mutated is the proteins on the spikes of the coronavirus, which now make it a lot more, y- in simple terms, sticky to human cells, and therefore a lot more contagious and a lot more likely to be viable once spread. So a good question to ask yourself is like, should I be concerned? Is this virus in the United States yet? And the answer is we don't know, but you have no real reason to yet be concerned because there's absolutely no evidence that this particular strain of coronavirus is any more deadly than the other strains. So it's not like a new, deadlier, more dangerous coronavirus, but rather just a coronavirus that we are seeing for the first time that is more contagious, but not necessarily more deadly. It could be more deadly, and that more people get sick now as a result, and thus more people die. But again, this mutation doesn't have a lot of bearing on its death rate. I think about 67% of cases in London were found to be of this new mutated virus. But again, nothing new, and many experts are currently confident that it will not affect the vaccine, that the vaccine will continue to be safe. The vaccine has been safe. There hasn't been any major um, complaints about the coronavirus vaccine, no major complications. Some people have had complications. Remember that, this vaccine, no matter how perfectly it's made, will always have complications because everyone's different. Everyone has a different body. Everyone has a different way of processing some of these medicines that are provided to us. And in this case, it's a vaccine. So despite that, despite those individual cases, overall, there are no major complications reported with the vaccine, no major problems. Right now, healthcare workers and elderly and people who are weaker have been the first in line to receive this vaccine. It's been a big deal, so big that all these vaccines that are being administered are being televised, specifically with public figures like Joe Biden, who on Tuesday, along with other public figures, got vaccinated and encouraged other people to be vaccinated. And on that note, it is worth mentioning that the vaccine is administered in two stages. So far, Moderna and Pfizer, the two vaccines that are available, are given in two different stages. One first dose and a second dose administered between 3 to 4 weeks later, depending on what version of the vaccine you're taking. And so on that note, I'd also like to mention that the mutation is really unlikely to set us back too far because there are many vaccines being developed right now, and it's really likely that if not Pfizer or Moderna, some one of these, I think I saw over 20 different vaccines being developed, is likely to be effective against the mutated virus. So right now, there's no concern about the mutation. Healthcare, I know, like I said, healthcare workers and the elderly are first in line. Most healthcare insurance agencies have been offering these first to people that are more likely to get really sick from coronavirus, and specifically, definitely healthcare workers. I mean, healthcare workers have been in the front lines, and they're a priority in this vaccine and its administration. We continue to administer more and more vaccines. Regular people, or not regular people, but people who are not at risk, and people who are not, we're all regular people, by the way, and people who are not healthcare workers need to wait. Some people are thinking of up until June 2021. Some people are blaming Trump for not ordering more vaccines, etc. You know what I mean? So it's likely that we won't have access until June 2021. But like I said, things change so often with these particular topics. Laws go into place, people delay laws, etc. So it's really likely that we won't know exactly when the general public will have access to the vaccine until we hear more from these companies that are developing the vaccine. As things develop, as countries like the UK figure out these mutations, as these outbreaks start to settle down or start to become exacerbated. I mean, right now we're still in the middle of it, and it's not likely to get any better from here to next year. 2021 will definitely not be, as of yet, much different in its first couple months than the last half of 2020 has been. So, um, that leaves me with some questions on the vaccine and the coronavirus mutation. Is first, is it in the United States? It is, I think, safer to assume that it is than to assume that it isn't. Is it more deadly? No, it is not more deadly. It is not more dangerous yet. No evidence indicates that it is. Um, it could be that it mutates to be more deadly, but so far there have not been any spikes in death tolls or number of people that die as a result of coronavirus. How does it affect the vaccine? How does the mutation affect the vaccine? It doesn't. And even if it were to affect the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine, there's about 20 other vaccines being developed currently that are likely to be just as efficient and effective as these first two vaccines that are being administered. Is finally the last question I had is the vaccine. The last question I thought I'd ask is the vaccine safe? And as I mentioned earlier, yes, of course it is safe. There has yet to be any major reports of any major complications from the vaccine. Most people that have taken it have reported mild symptoms of sickness, but that is normal with these vaccines. That it does not mean that you yourself are sick. That's more like your body creating antibodies for the coronavirus. Also, it's worth noting that when you do receive the vaccine, your body makes all kinds of antibodies. It doesn't make just one type of antibody, it makes all sorts of different types of antibodies that are really likely to keep up to some degree with some of the mutations of the coronavirus. So it makes it even more likely that the vaccine continues to be viable despite the mutation. No, this is not. contagion or some kind of post-apocalyptic world we're living in. We're still yet to see, this virus clear up. It looks like it might with the vaccine. The vaccine was produced in record time, and it is safe, and it went through all the same phases and procedures as any other vaccine that has been developed before went through. And finally, for to end the night, I do want to keep these rather short. I do want to talk about the Trump pardons. Trump did pardon several people this week. I think 26 people 2 nights ago or last night, and about 20 people the night before. I hope I read that right. I hope I'm remembering that right because I forgot to write that down. But several people were pardoned this week, many of whom were involved in the Russia investigation, some of which were charged with lying to the FBI, etc. Do keep in mind that accepting a pardon from the president does mean that you admit guilt, to the crime, because you can't, otherwise you're asked not to accept the pardon. I don't know the way that it goes, and I think that the person can't be tried for the. I don't. I have to look up a little bit more on because. I did know this, but it just slipped my mind on the pardon and what it means post. But right now, what we do know is people like Roger Stone and Manafort have been pardoned by Donald Trump. Donald Trump did say he was going to pardon some people who may have been arrested on drug crimes, etc. And a few people did get pardoned who were, victims of mass incarceration. Uh, so one guy, I forget his name, who had turned his life around and started helping people, was pardoned. Who was convicted of like dealing drugs, and some other woman as well. A very similar story. She got involved in nonprofits and everything, and got pardoned for having turned her life around. Um, I do want you to keep in mind that there are very few limits as to how pardoning power can be used by the president. It's likely that he can even pardon himself. He can pardon his family members. We are likely to see more pardons happen as the weeks go by, especially as the transition of power nears us. So, some questions to be asked here is: will Trump pardon himself and his family, and what do these pardons really mean? Especially keeping in mind the fact that these pardons are a admission of guilt for the crimes that these individuals are being pardoned for. I think someone did reject a pardon from Trump, and a lot of people were confused about why. I forget this particular person's name. Did not write that down. But he did not accept a pardon because this individual did not feel like they were guilty for the things they were being charged with. Nonetheless, these pardons overall bring a lot of questions, especially people that are accepting these pardons and the people that are being pardoned by Donald Trump, and who is going to be pardoned by Donald Trump next. So, with that, I think I will say good night, and thank you so much for joining me. This was a short week. It is my first time doing this. So, as I get more comfortable, I'll be doing this maybe a little bit longer with a lot more news. We'll be going deeper into some of these news. I'm not calling it a night. I'm just saying that those are the four biggest things this week that were called to my attention. Do keep in mind that it was a holiday week. So, I try to stick to specifically this week because if I just went back, I could go back really far. I mean, there's an infinite amount of news in the past. So I started with this week. This week, I feel like those were the four major movements, at least in the United States. Especially during this holiday. Next week, we're going to do similar coverage, but probably have a lot more topics, go further in depth. I'm going to leave some space for some questions right after I finish. So I'll be taking questions from you guys. Maybe we'll be talking about some of these topics because this is a talk. So now that I've talked to you, I'll give you the opportunity to talk to me and get deeper into some of these different events that went by this week. So I do want to address this one. So Raven, Hiram, the nurse that passed out from the Pfizer vaccine, there are reports that she is dead. There has been a gag order from her family, and her social media accounts are not active. I do want to say that I don't know exactly what the news is on that, but the last that I heard about the nurse that fainted from the vaccine, and I wanted to comment specifically on this because this nurse was from El Paso, and I do know a lot of people that work as nurses down in El Paso, and they were able to tell me that she fainted from a condition that she had suffered from before, not necessarily related to the vaccine, that she was doing fine. Again, unless, I hear other evidence, I'll definitely look into it. Thank you so much, Raven, for bringing this to my attention. But again, I have no particular evidence for that at the moment, so I can't absolutely confirm that, but I can confirm what I've heard in the past about other people who have, uh, or that one person that passed out from the vaccine in El Paso. We could be talking about two different people too. Yes, Opal. So we will be talking about local news, and that's going to be happening on Tuesdays. So stay tuned. This is one of a lot more content. This is one video of a lot more content that's going to be produced regularly. Do be do have the confidence that this is going to get better as time goes by. I'll be a lot more capable of delivering the news in a much more articulate and a lot more in-depth way. These holidays have been heavy for me in terms of work, so I've been working a lot, along with the fact that it is also my first time endeavoring, uh, in such a field. So have the confidence. This is going to get better, and we are going to be talking about local news and a lot more other types of things that I think are important for our communities to know. So I'm looking through your comments. I'm trying to find some questions. Who gets the vaccine? I think I did answer that. Healthcare workers and people that are at risk. And I think a lot of those assessments are currently being made by health insurance companies and hospitals. Talk about what happened to Brandy Vaughn. We'll go into that. I'll look it up, and we might touch that. We might touch up on that on the next installment of the national news talk, or if that's local news, we'll talk about in the local news section of this content. You're definitely not boozy today. I was definitely a little bit nervous talking to you guys today. Am not gonna lie. So, Mark, going back to the stimulus packet question, he asked, people are in thousands of death in thousands of dollars in debt in back rent. How is $600 enough? That's a really good question. I think a lot of people are wondering whether $600 are enough. Democrats have called for Donald Trump to negotiate for more money after this one bill. Again, passing this bill was important because it could have led to a government shutdown as of Tuesday, and it included a lot of different and important aid for a lot of programs that were ending. Unemployment specifically was ended. And so a lot of people might now, as a result, be only getting 10 weeks of aid versus 11 weeks. They passed the midnight deadline, so everything was reset. Some people may not get as much money as they might have if Donald Trump had ratified or signed the bill into law earlier rather than later. Georgia, yes, we are going to be doing that every Friday. So I know that not all of you guys see my posts, unfortunately, but I urge you to go on the page, and in the page there is a flyer with the schedule for this week, for the different types of content that we're going to be producing. Next is local news, and after that we're going to be producing and releasing a podcast. On Friday I think we're covering more local news, and then on Sunday we're doing national news again. No, on Friday we're doing the talk with Mercado. I need to go back and look at the schedule, but it's in the page. Every Friday for sure, we are going to be talking with streamers, and every Wednesday we're going to be releasing podcasts, and that may include a streamer or not, but consistently with Mercado, we're going to be doing that on Fridays. Huh. That may have been my mistake. I might have not properly edited the title of this stream. I am so sorry if that's what it says. One suggestion, go a little bit deeper in researching. Of course, April always going to go deeper into the research. So thank you so much for the suggestion. I hope that at some point, we're going to be going really deep into some of these topics. I might dedicate other days into going deeper. I feel like this is more of a short recap of the facts, answering a couple questions. But I know that with some of these particular topics, we could spend probably hours upon hours talking about their implications and stuff. So as I figure out, again, the way that this works best by trial and error, we will be finding, I think, a really good way to go really deep into some of these topics, and having a lot more even interaction, from you guys and everything. So thank you so much. We are planning also to go to DC on January 20th for the inauguration. I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be present, who may be upset, who might be really excited. There might be a clash. I am not sure, but I feel compelled to be there for inauguration. So stay tuned for that. We might put out a fundraiser for that. I do need help to get there financially. But anyway, we'll be releasing all those details sooner rather than later as this week progresses. How do I get to your page? So that's a really good question. To get to my page, just go to facebook.com/ImHiram, or you could go to ImHiram.com as well to reach my my website, but more than likely going to get more of those updates on the Facebook page, facebook.com/ImHiram, just like it is right here. Let me go ahead and put an overlay for you. Um, and take this off and then hide this right here. Facebook.com/Hiram. So again, thank you so much for tuning in. Today we went over what I thought were four of the biggest topics that happened this week, some short facts about them. We're going to go deeper into these different topics as this program develops. This is the first installment of many more national weekly coverage talks and chats. I will be taking your questions every week, seeing what you think and what you're feeling about these topics, and hopefully even dedicating some days to going further into depth, talking to experts, etc. So again, thank you so much to every single one of you for tuning in today. All of you guys have a beautiful day. I hope you had a wonderful Christmas, and I hope that you continue to have wonderful holidays as we get closer to the new year. Hopefully, the new year is full of joy and happiness and positivity and well-being and everything good. I mean, I can't imagine, hoping for anything that's not good for all of you guys, since you are awesome and have already endured the torture of going through the very first installment of our weekly news chat, national news chat. So thank you so much and have a good night.